Hello, welcome to the Career Services Center webinar. These are some of the webinar attendee expectations. I do want to go over them. Please type your full name and email address into the chat so we can collect attendance. Mute your microphone. You may keep your video on or off. Ask questions via the chat so everyone can see them. Your questions will be answered at the end of this presentation. Also note, we are recording this and it will be posted to NSC's Career Services Center's YouTube video channel at the bit.ly link below. If you are being distracted or disruptive, the host may mute you, your video, audio, or remove you from the webinar. So the topic of this webinar is, what is a webinar and how do I navigate it? Once again, please put your questions in the chat box and also make sure you put in your full name and your email address. That's a picture of me. Hi, my name is Noelle Garcia. I'm the internship manager at Nevada State College. So, have any of you ever been asked to attend a webinar? Go ahead, feel free to answer it in the chat. Yes, no, maybe you have no clue what it is. The sample I have showing here is actually from a virtual town hall. That was an invite from the chancellor of NSC, or of Nevada State College, and the rest of the NSC institutions. You might be getting some of these via email to you, especially from different organizations or your school itself. So what is a webinar? According to dictionary.com, a webinar is a seminar or other presentation that takes place on the internet, allowing participants in different locations to see and hear the presenter, ask questions, and sometimes answer polls. So what we are doing right now, what we are in, this is a webinar. Why are webinars so popular? Webinars are ways for people to come together and learn and share information rather than attend a live event. I want to say many of your professors right now are using webinars as their classroom environments. However, organizations such as schools, businesses, nonprofits are using various webinar platforms to host their online events, similar to what I'm doing right now. Organizations are able to record and save their webinars to share out later. I am also doing this. Organizations that host the webinar can control who's invited to the webinar. All of you guys knew to go into Handshake to find the link in order to join this. We were controlling who was able to see this posting and this event by not having it online anywhere but Handshake. Only students at NSC can access Handshake. Webinars are convenient since no travel is needed. All of you guys are probably sitting in the comfort of your home right now or in your office. And also they are low or have no cost. This is actually completely free to you as attendees. Our school has paid for the platform. However, Zoom, what we are using right now, is actually free to use. Webinars allow you to learn from professionals, knowledgeable experts, as well as make professional connections. And of course, due to the current stay-at-home order by the President of the United States and our state governor, webinars have become more common since people cannot meet in groups. So this is a way for us to all come together, but yet not be in the same space. So what are some of the webinar platforms? So the one we are in right now is Zoom, and that's actually the sample picture on the side. That is a Zoom conference call right there, or webinar. There's also Microsoft Teams, Google Hangouts, BlueJeans. Actually, those four are used within the NSC institutions. So you also should have access to Microsoft Teams and BlueJeans as a student. We also have GoToMeetings, On24, GoToWebinar, WebEx. There are so many, I couldn't list them all, nor could I find them all. So you can get an invite from any of these types of platforms. What are the terms used in webinars? Okay, so host, the person presenting and bringing together the webinar. So technically, Nevada State College's Career Center and myself are the hosts. We are the ones bringing you together, the Career Services Center, and I'm the one presenting to you. Attendees, the people attending the webinar to listen, learn, and ask questions. You in the audience right now listening to me speak are the attendees of this webinar. Moderator. So this person can also be the host. So I'm part of the moderator. I actually have someone in the Career Services Center also helping me answer questions and mute and kind of doing the back end. They are also the moderator. Sometimes though, a host can have multiple hosts presenting. And this is when one person moderates and asks questions between those individuals. Share screen, the ability to allow another person in the webinar to show their computer screen. I am currently showing you my screen, and that's how you're able to see this PowerPoint presentation. It is usually the host or the moderator that is sharing the screen. Unless it's a really small group, then it can also be the attendees who are allowed to share the screen. Mute volume. Your computer or your laptop or your iPad have a microphone on them, and that's how you're able to hear things. So this is where you're able to mute and unmute volume, as well as next is the video camera or the web camera, camera on your computer so that you can see. This allows people to see you specifically. Next, we kind of talked about this earlier, the comment and chat box. We're asking you guys to use the chat box right now to answer questions and put your name in there. It's the box on the screen where you can type comments or questions. And then the last one I want to go over is surveys after the webinar. Many organizations want your feedback and your experience of the webinar. So after it, the host can put up a survey for you to complete before you actually exit out of the webinar. I do not have one of those on this presentation. So are you guys ready for some fun? Oh, I can hear you guys all screaming out there. All right, so we are going to practice. You are currently muted, so I want you to unmute your volume. Now, where you can go about finding this, I kind of put a screenshot at the bottom here. If you scroll at the top of your screen, it should pop up a very similar header for you, and you will need to unmute. So in this image, this one's muted. I would click on that and it would unmute me. Everybody able to do that? I'm starting to hear it. Great, awesome. Were you able to find it? If anybody's having any trouble, please put it in the comment box. Now let's do the exact opposite. Let's now go and mute our volume. Oh, it looks like we have Francis. Somebody's joining us. Sorry. Next, I want you to turn off your camera. So at the bottom here, you will see the camera icon. Once again, when you hover over your top, why don't you turn on your camera? There we go. I'm seeing someone. Thank you. Yep, turn on your camera. Let's see that you know how to access this. I'll turn on mine. There we go. Wonderful. Now let's turn off our cameras. So the last thing I want you to do is, you should have already done this, but let's get your name in the chat box because we're collecting attendance. We want your name. So every webinar has these, what I want to call this like header line in different places. Sometimes it's at the bottom of your screen and sometimes it's at the top of your screen. I've seen it on the side before. Once you figure out where it is, most of them are very similar in nature where you're able to mute and hide your camera. I want you to also note at the end, you have the area to leave the webinar. So this is where you find these in many of the different platforms. So why would I want to attend a webinar? This picture's fun because it's actually Zoom, the organization Zooming together. The reason why you'd want to attend is to learn new information from people, as well as to share information with people, to communicate with others, team members, coworkers, family, and friends. That's kind of why we're coming here. I know that you're probably doing this a lot even with your own families in order to say hi. Also to ask questions to people in the webinar who are hosting the webinar. Usually the person presenting is an expert in the field and they're able to help you answer any questions you may have. Another reason why you'd want to attend a webinar is for professional development and career exploration and knowledge, right? So many things you could do, gain more certificates attending webinars, right? As well as experience. To gather others when meeting space is limited. I know sometimes on NSC we have issues with reserving a room because it's already being used. This gives you a chance to still come together and meet without having to leave your space. And of course, to gather with others who are not nearby. I know that I've been visiting with friends that live in different countries over this because it's easier to see them. What do I need in order to attend a webinar? Webinars can be seen on a device such as a smartphone, tablet, laptop, or computer. The last two are preferred for the best experience. In the chat box, why don't you tell me what device you are currently using? Is it your smartphone? Is it your tablet? I'm on a laptop currently. This is what makes these fun. I know that I've used Zoom on my phone before, same thing as Google Teams, Microsoft Teams. So most of the time, webinar platforms do need to be downloaded to the device prior to entering the meeting. The host of the webinar and the attendees in the webinar need the internet to view it. Most of you guys are at home using your home internet. You could also be maybe in an office still using internet. Devices should have audio and video capabilities, but at minimum audio. Usually in order to hear the presentation, you do need to be able to have the audio sound. Sometimes you do not need the video unless the webinar host asks you to have that. Organizations hosting a webinar can charge an attendee, so be aware of fees when you do sign up, but many webinars are free. What if the webinar is showing when I'm not available? That is actually happening to me right now. There's another webinar I want to be a part of that I'm not able to join. So one of the things you can do is ask the host if they'll be recording the webinar. So we are recording this, so if anyone missed it, they now have the ability to re-watch it. You can also ask the host if they will be having additional dates and times of the webinar. Sometimes it's a series or they replay the same one over and over again to gather a different audience. And you can always ask the host if they'd be willing to share their presentation, whether it's PowerPoint or Keynote. So if anybody wanted this presentation who's in this webinar, I'd be happy to share it with you. Can other attendees hear or see me in a webinar? So I always want to start with, I want to default on yes. Always be aware of that. However, to be more complicated, of course, and the answer is that it actually depends on the webinar setup. And all webinars can be set up differently. We actually had it where we asked you to mute yourself when you came in. So at the home page when we started, it said mute yourself. So webinars can be set up with only the host and the hostesses can be seen. They can also be set up where the attendees are able to be seen as well as the host. Ours does have this capability. That's what we were playing with earlier, the turning on your camera and turning off. So it does depend on how it's set up, but many times assume that you are being heard and seen. So always go find that camera and mute button to make sure you're following instructions. Usually though, the host will either ask you to mute your audio or ask you to mute your video, depending on presentation. Once again, I just want to say always double check this so that you follow instructions as well, so someone doesn't hear you. If your visual or webcam is connected, then the host has the ability to share or not share you. So like I'm able to share your screen as long as you are showing me your face on the screen. You always do have the option to turn that off though. Many webinar platforms allow you to test your audio and visual before joining the webinar. Most of you guys were able, a pop-up screen came on when you came in and it said, would you like to join? And underneath that, it said, would you like to test your software capabilities, because they want to make sure you know how to use it. Listen only webinar or attendee participation webinar. So listen only is exactly that. where attendees can only listen to the host who is presenting. This is very similar to a classroom lecture style where you're sitting there listening to your professor speak. However, attendee participation can come in different formats as well. You could be asked to use the comment box, for questions, kind of how I am doing right now with you. You could be allowed to ask questions at the end of the webinar, so the person might unmute everyone and allow for people to verbally ask the questions. Or it's open dialogue that is moderated by the host. So I could unmute you all right now and start asking questions and go one by one of the attendees in order to have a conversation going with us. Just some general webinar etiquette for attendees. Log into the webinar early so you know your technology is working prior, and to troubleshoot any issues with the software. I know this has happened to me. You think you already have whatever platform it is downloaded, and then you realize, wow, I have never used this one before, and it's going to take you some extra time to get on. And sometimes if you do not have and do not enter the webinar on time, sometimes they have a head count and you could miss the opportunity. Mute your audio if lines are not muted. Once again, that's the #1 rule, is you always want to make sure that you mute yourself so that people can't hear anything going on basically where you are. So be also an active participant by providing input when requested. So all of you guys have been doing great. I applaud you all for actually putting comments in for me. Feedback can come in different forms. It could be just asking for general feedback as well as polling questions. A lot of the technology now allows you to actually put up a poll where people can push a button on it. I do not have a sample of that right now. I apologize. Be respectful if the chat is for public view. Please keep your contributions helpful and considerate to the host and participants. Remember, you're not the one who's presenting. It is the host that's presenting. Allow them to take center stage. Once again, if you have more questions for them, you should have their contact information to reach out to them after the webinar. Remove distractions from your space to give you full attention. So if you're attending a webinar, it's like going to the movie theater. You shouldn't be having anything else there but what you need in front of you. You can also reach out to the presenter or host after the event with information provided. So if you are missing more or want more, once again, you could always reach out to the host. If you unmute, do not interrupt and be aware of the noises around you. I know I've done it before where I could hear my dog in the background barking and I have to mute myself because I could see everybody going, where is that dog coming from? So don't do that. Always be prepared to mute yourself. So now for some examples of types of webinars that you could be attending. There are e-learning and continuing education delivery, employee training, product demonstration, customer onboarding, corporate communication, panelist discussions, interviews, company recruitment and hiring webinars, employer information session webinars, and professional association webinars. If you are looking for a job in this time period during COVID, interviews will probably be done online before in person, so you would be doing them in a webinar platform like this, as well as information sessions. I know that we are working with employers to have these types of information sessions available to you. Now for 5 reasons your career depends on attending webinars. So career development, you should never want to stop learning no matter what industry you are in. To impress your boss, the more you know, the more you can bring to the company. You get to learn from the pros. A good webinar host teaches attendees from talking about personal experiences. You can see what your competition is doing, staying up to date within your industry, and know what others are doing to innovate and help you stay competitive. You can make connections. Networking and collaborating with like-minded people can lead to inspiration and more powerful brand strategy. So exactly you attending this right now is giving you an edge on your peers. You are now networking with the Career Center. You are learning about something from a pro, right? And you will be able to impress your boss when you go on that interview to tell them what you've been doing. So what webinars are you looking to attend? An interview, an information session, virtual career fair, a career services webinar? I do want to note we have 2 more webinars coming up, one tomorrow, May 27th, on resume writing. It is from 4 to 5 p.m. And then on Thursday, May 28th, job search strategies, also from 4 to 5 p.m. I have a quick short video I just want to share with you that kind of summarizes what we just went over.
Hi, welcome to the Beginner's Guide to Webinars, Module 1. In Module 1, we're going to start with the basics. What is a webinar? A webinar is just an online seminar or workshop that's delivered over the internet. For a webinar, there's a host who organizes the event, and that host invites attendees. It can be anywhere from a handful of attendees to thousands, and these attendees can be located anywhere in the world. The host sends emails typically to invite the attendees. The attendees click on a link in that email, which takes them to the webinar hosting provider. The most common one is GoToWebinar. There are others though. And they click on that link and register. You don't need to have an account with GoToWebinar or with the hosting provider. Typically, you just fill in your name and email address and you're registered for the webinar. And then they'll send you reminders before the webinar starts. So everyone gets registered and then they wait until the scheduled time. And at the scheduled time, everyone logs in to the webinar hosting provider and participates in the webinar. Thanks for watching.
Video I wanted to share with you. Now, do you guys have any questions? I'm going to go ahead and stop recording, but I'm here to answer any questions.